Hello, everyone. I'm Michele DeLuca. This is my friend Nancy Proulx. The title of our podcast is The Power Portal, and we talk about all matter of power in human nature and how to enhance your power, how to find where your power resides in your spirit, and how to be a more powerful and effective human in a world that needs plenty of humans being in their power.
Yeah, and really, when we think of power, we're thinking of authenticity.
Authenticity, yeah, I like that.
How true we are to ourselves, while still being aware of who we're around or who we're interacting with.
Yes, and this particular podcast, is about using the word no. Right, Nancy? We've both had experiences in our life where we have to say no. No is very hard for women. I know it's hard for me to say no.
Yes.
And it's hard for you. You've
I just said
yes.
yes.
Yes, it is. She did say yes. So it's hard to say no. And we are talking about saying no specifically when important life lessons, come back around a second time or a third. Right. Because at some point you have to recognize the lesson and you have to say no to the behavior that's drawing that lesson to you. And we were thinking specifically of times in our life that we'll share in a minute, but I wanted to recount something that I had seen Oprah say in one of her daily messages. And she said, if you don't listen to the message the first time, the universe speaks a little louder. You might respond like, that's interesting, or I wonder why that happened. If you don't respond by recognizing it's a sign from the universe gets increasingly louder until eventually it tosses a brick at you. And I love that because that's kind of the image I've had. How do you see this message that we're relaying today in our podcast?
I see it as an evolution of our soul. And most of what happens when we talk about the power portal happens internally. And it's a frequency that we want to overcome or rise above so that the lesson doesn't come back to us. But as you said, Michele, most of us are pretty much unconscious a lot of our time until we get hit with a brick or the wall falls down, which has happened to me. It's happened to probably, everybody.
I think that's how the universe teaches us.
Yeah.
And we both have stories. As I said, first I want to remind you, Nancy is an intuitive counselor. I'm a journalist and an author and a researcher, a personal researcher on matters of consciousness and life and death. And Nancy has a background of animal whispering, so to speak, particularly horse whispering. She's learned so deeply about herd mentality and the horses in particular that it enhanced her ability to assist humans with the issues that they're facing in their lives.
Yeah, the horses have taught me a lot about the human condition.
Yes, and I can vouch for that, having spent time with Nancy in her barn with her horses. It's miraculous work. In any event, back to our lessons. I was telling you earlier that one of the greatest lessons that doubled back on me in my life was when I was working as a young journalist at the Buffalo Courier Express, a more than 100-year-old newspaper that Mark Twain once worked at. And the newspaper closed in 1982. And I was a young journalist, and my whole identity was so wrapped up in being a journalist that I didn't know who I was after the newspaper closed. There were no journalism jobs. The market was glutted by the reporters kind of let out into the community seeking jobs of their own. And I didn't know who I would be if I wasn't a journalist. And that's funny because I spent years coming to terms with the fact that you are not your job title. And yet still, not too long ago, when I left my full-time work as a journalist at a newspaper in Niagara Falls, I once again had to face the question, who am I if I'm not a journalist? And I couldn't believe that because I thought I had learned that lesson. I thought I had learned that I am simply me, and that when I want to do a creative project, I follow that energy, and that it's okay if I don't do any creative projects. So I had to say no to that message that came around a second time. If you're not a journalist, then who are you? You have something in your history, too, that taught you to say no to those responses?
Yeah, I believe mine was more around boundaries and taking care of others before I would take care of myself. And being in the horse world for so long and having my own boarding facility, you really get caught up, and also children. I mean, women too. We lose ourselves in not only our job
Oh,
or
goodness, yes. We lose
yeah,
ourselves in all
in our
aspects of life.
mothering, and we forget to take care of ourselves. And when I eventually had moved out of the horse boarding business so that I could have more time for my own, taking care of myself and maybe for what I wanted to do creatively, I found myself in the same situation again. And I ignored it for probably a good 6 months. And I would think that I could, if I reflect back on my life, that this happened in other areas of my life, but this specific situation was happening again. And so here I am every day, coming away from the barn, kind of feeling rushed, feeling suppressing some anger around it, and always
Rushing someplace because you were contributing and wholeheartedly to the location where you were and kind of
and
engaging
helping,
and
yeah,
helping
and helping the person who owned the barn. And I realized my husband would be in my ear saying, you've done this already, you really don't want to do this anymore. And and it originally it was just a discussion and feelings within me, until the one day I was late for probably another appointment, or whether it was going to a golf or whatever. But I'm driving and yep, and had an accident. Took the mirror off my car, and
the mirror.
Yeah, the mirror, the thing that you hold up as a reflection of who you are and what you're presenting yourself with. And it was as I looked back on it and took time to reflect on it, I knew I needed to make some changes. It was definitely a life situation that was a mirror to me.
So as we're discussing this, we're also thinking about ways that we can more quickly recognize the way the universe comes back with a message a second time, louder whispers. So my question would be to you, how do you recognize the whispers?
For me, it was a lesson that I knew that I needed to make a change in my asserting of myself and my boundaries. And I believe that the lessons repeated themselves to me because I might have done things, asserted a boundary with reluctance or some resistance in me, like, oh, yes, you're pushed, oh, you need to do this. You have somebody outside of you, yes, telling you need to put a boundary up, or you need to assert yourself, and you need to take care of yourself first. So it was a situation that showed up with the help of someone else, encouraging you to rise above the situation. The situation can show up again because maybe I was being asked to make that change without having to consult someone else and use someone else's energy to help me. So if we have this lesson that's showing up again, and let's bring in an example of maybe the whole dating scene where you keep attracting either the same boyfriend or the same girlfriend, okay? And the same type of issues going on in there. What I'm saying is that we need to take some time to reflect. Oh, what's going on here? I see this pattern repeating itself again. Watching for the triggers that are happening in your body. And remember, it's not about running away.
Yes, it's not about running away. Sometimes you stay and just right the ship, I think.
You communicate, right? And you have to communicate in a clear way where your own truth is being explained. Not that the other person has to accept it, but this is, maybe the lesson wasn't to attract the best boyfriend or girlfriend, but to open up communication, and that's why you were brought together. To
Good
open
point.
your voice up.
This might be where the word no comes in, which is I love you, but no, this behavior will not do.
Right.
And I was thinking other ways to recognize it was disruption in your system. As you said, listen to your body. So I'm thinking maybe it starts with dismay and disturbance, and all of a sudden you think there's something going on here, and that's how I think you begin to see it. You get awareness of the fact that something needs to change. I am uncomfortable. I'm experiencing discomfort somewhere in my body, and it's because I am not happy with the disruption that's occurring, the way whatever's happening out there is making me feel in here.
Right. It's just called resistance.
Resistance.
But to recognize the emotion, or the bodily, you're saying the body, right? Like
yes.
a body pain, like maybe your stomach starts to get upset.
That's
right?
definitely a clear message, I think.
Right. Or you're grinding your teeth, or when you don't have a voice. Those are just all things that come to the surface when I think about someone not having a voice in a situation.
Yes, teeth grinding, stomach upset,
Lump in your throat.
Lump in your throat. Perfect examples that something might need to be said. Many of us resist speaking out for our own benefit, I think. And it's probably the most important lesson that any soul can learn is to speak up and speak out for what you might need in a relationship or in a work environment or anywhere we go in life where we're not satisfied or we're unhappy with the energy of the relationship that we are in.
Yeah. And what I think makes those really deep relationships is that level of authenticity that you have with yourself first.
Yes. So can we look at the solutions that we had for our own issues of that lesson, doubling back that important life lesson? The first time it happened to me as a young reporter, when I suddenly was no longer a reporter because my newspaper closed, I had to do a deep dive into the meaning of life. I literally began researching everything that I could find on how to feel better. One of the first things I did was start researching meditation. And I found that there were so many different ways people were using meditation to feel better inside of themselves and to get clarity about their feelings. I interviewed a journalism professor who was using meditation to help his students be more creative. I interviewed a psychotherapist who used meditation to help her patients tap into their innermost feelings that they might not be aware of. I interviewed somebody from hospice who was helping patients use meditation to get clear on the peace that can be found at the end of our lives, even when facing illness and pain. There were several other people that I interviewed for that, but that experience alone helped me to at least begin walking towards healing of that first encounter with an important life lesson of not being suddenly who my job title had led me to believe that I was. The second time it happened, thankfully, I was stunned that the lesson was coming back, that I had left full-time work as a journalist and now find myself with no title to say, oh, hi, yeah, I'm a journalist. Now I think I'll practice saying I'm Michele, and I do lots of fun things to keep myself busy at this time of my life, always with the hope of bringing light to the world. I think that's kind of the job title that I will define myself with from now on.
And I mean, I think you have rebirthed yourself so many times, and I would think it would just working with those hospice patients that death is the illusion, whether it's death of an identity or the physical death, or, I mean, you have, walking through that, and that's part of what we do in this podcast is to relate the road that we've traveled and all the gifts that you and I are trying to offer back.
What Nancy is referring to, I think, is when I was doing legacy videos for hospice patients. Was that what you're referring
Yeah.
to? And I spent a lot of time helping them to record the details of their lives, and it was the most joyful of experiences every time. It left them with a huge inner peace, knowing their stories would remain behind. And I guess that's what we also want to share is our stories, to help you think about your stories, because I find that our healing is inside of our stories, especially when we take the time to say, well, gee, this happened to me once and it's happening to me again, and how can I identify what I need to say no to and thrive in this environment.
And to do it with a little bit of humor.
I like that as well.
My mirror comes off. I mean, what clearer message? I take the mirror off my car.
How long did it take you? Did you stop the car, look at the mirror and go, oh boy. Then you got to look up and go, really? The mirror?
Well, I was angry at first, of course. But as I took time to reflect on it and realize that everything is interconnected that happens in our life, and no matter if it's a difficult situation, there's always a message there for us.
What did you do next once you realized that the mirror was a bit of synchronicity from the universe saying, slow down and take a look at this again?
Well, obviously I knew that I needed to change the situation of caring for the horses, that part of my life, the everyday caring for them was done.
Yeah.
So, but that was the surface.
Okay, go deeper.
That was just the surface.
But by way of explanation, they were your horses and other people's horses, because you were enthusiastically diving in to help everyone around you, taking care of not just your own horses on a daily basis, but other people's horses as well. Is that the way it was working?
And
for you?
I was living someone else's dream to help them, and that's just a part of empathy is that I always want to support everybody else at the expense of supporting my true essence and what my goals are, even taking time to sit back and reflect on what are my goals. So that was kind of where it sent me. Where, if I'm not doing this, where do I want to explore? What's the next thing that's going to show up in my life? Or do I maybe just have to be still for a while and let the next thing show up?
That's probably one of the hardest things to do. And I think what I just described, when I found myself, again, without a title, without somewhere to go every day, I'm really working hard on letting the next project or the next, because when I say work or projects at this stage in my life, I'm going to be 70 soon. I want to do projects that are joyful and fun, like this podcast. We do it because we both love talking to each other about these issues, and we thought maybe because of our life experiences, some of them might help others dealing with the same problems and help them generate their own solutions. Let's describe again a little more closely what exactly you did at the time. How long did it take you to recognize the mirror was some sort of synchronicity?
Oh, it probably, I probably maybe really deep dive a month later.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, I would have guessed you'd have thought almost immediately, mirror, broken.
No. I mean, I knew that I was suppressing emotions, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to be in that situation, or that my soul was asking for more growth versus staying stagnant. But reflecting on it and really taking some initiative to move out of that, it took me, it takes courage.
It really does. The courage that I'm needing within my own life now is to just be still and listen. There's something that I believe with my whole heart these days, which is to follow the energy. When you are meant to do something, the path almost lights up, and I really want to wait and see where to go next. So I'm taking tentative steps, like, should I do this documentary, or should I do this little movie, or should I write a book? And I'm taking tentative steps, but I'm not diving in wholeheartedly because I'm not yet feeling the energy. And for somebody like me, that's terrifying. Oh my God, what if I do nothing?
Yeah.
my greatest fear. And yet there's the lesson
Yeah.
again, the most important lesson. You are not what you do, you are what you are.
Yeah.
Did I say that right? Because that's not exactly it. You are not what you do, you are who you are.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Good, all right. The point is that when you're experiencing a lesson that comes around again, especially if
Yeah.
it feels like an important lesson, there is no better time than that moment to sit back and say, okay, why am I experiencing this again? And like me, perhaps you're better at experiencing it, better at facing it the second time, as you are in coming to terms with the fact that no, it's now time for me to chase some of my own dreams rather than help someone else with theirs.
Right.
Those
And
those are all clues, I think.
and I think it's also relevant to mention that sometimes people come into a life and they might have one area that seems to be their trouble spot. Maybe it's money.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's their creativity. So I do see that also as a piece of it too. That tends to repeat itself.
Yes. And no better sign when it comes again a third time and a fourth time, then you know that there's really something here for you to learn from and evolve from and eventually become a better, stronger person and step more completely into your own personal power. I just want to add one thing that's been serving me lately, and that is a bit of automatic writing. I'm a writer, so sometimes writing is automatic anyway. It just kind of flows through me. But that's a good channel, I think, for problem solving, which is to pick someone, maybe it's someone famous or a philosopher or just someone you really admire, and sit down and ask them in your imagination what they would do in your circumstances, or if there's any wisdom that they can send to you, and then just start writing the first words that come to your head. It helps to be in a meditative state, to do some deep breathing. But the other day I accidentally wrote 4 different poems, and I'm not a poet and I don't write poetry, but they just started coming to me. And I read them at a poetry reading, an open mic poetry reading, and it was a little embarrassing because poets sometimes take years to write a poem, and the words are deep and soulful, and mine were not that. They were just words, but they were lovely, and I loved sharing them. But I did feel a little bit like a pretender, like they had worked so hard on the poems they were reading. And I said, so I just sat down and automatically wrote 4. I made it very clear I knew they were not great, but that it was an interesting process. And I think that's why I even bothered standing up at the mic, was to say, this is a fun way to just allow the words in your consciousness or your subconscious, or words coming in from the universe to show up on your page and give you some guidance.
Yeah, and I think what's the most important thing that you did is you took action with it, because we have the event, and a lot of times we have the event and we process it, but we don't take action to change the outcome. So you took action, and that's what I did with taking care of the horses. Okay, I need to extricate myself from this situation or adjust it somehow. It's about the event plus the action equals the outcome.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, keeping that in mind, remember that. I hope you join us next time. Thanks, Nance.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.